G'day, I'm Paul. Volvo XC90, I reckon it's a bit like a fine wine. It just seems to be getting better with age. You've got to remember that the XC90's been out now for a little over 5 years, but has the luxury SUV game escaped it? Well, that's what we want to find out today. This is the T6 R-Design version of the XC90. Prices kick off at just under $100,000 and it competes with cars like the BMW X5, the Audi Q7, the Mercedes-Benz GLE, and it even dabbles in there with the new Volkswagen Touareg. Now, if you do want to jump ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes up on the screen there, or just scroll down to the description where you'll find the links. And if you haven't done so already, I'd absolutely love it if you could hit subscribe and also press the bell icon so you can find out every time we drive a new car. Let's talk exterior design. See what I mean? I think it still looks really sharp despite its age, and I think it's because of some of the colours you can get this car in, a bit like this Nardo grey style colour, all but the base white at $2,000 extra. So it is a lot of money to pay for a colour that isn't just white. But if you jump down here at the front, I just love this brushed chrome look. You've got the black highlights. The R-Design is all about looking sporty. You have inscription and momentum in the XC90 range, but the R-Design signals the intentions of sportiness. Deep inside here though, you can see the active grille. That opens and closes when the engine needs a bit more cooling, and then it stays closed as well when you switch it on to start with so that it can reach optimum running temperature. Big proud Volvo badge there too. Check out these wheels. Actually, before I get to the wheels, full LED adaptive headlights with daytime running lights, and it's got that Thor's hammer LED light built into there that also acts as an indicator too. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. 22-inch alloy wheels. Not bad, right? You kind of expect these to be fitted to something like an Escalade. These are 275mm wide tyres and super low profile, 35 profile rubber. Now, in the past, other Volvos I've driven have been incredibly firm without air suspension. I can see here this car has the air suspension fitted. I'll be keen to see when we go for a drive whether this is still firm. They are 22-inch alloy wheels. I highly suspect it is going to be a little rough. Coming along the side of the car, black highlights on the side for our design. You get the black roof rails as well. Then if you skip around to the back here, this design is very reminiscent of the old XC90. You know how it had that light that ran up the side? This was also common on Volvo's older wagons as well. It is a really, really nice looking car, and I think that if you need a family SUV with 7 seats, you want one that looks good, and the XC90 absolutely meets that brief. Over on the back here, you'll see that you've spent money on the R-Design. You'll see that it's all-wheel drive, and you'll also see that it's Polestar engineered, which normally means it's firmer than it needs to be. We're inside the XC90 now, and I reckon Volvo has absolutely nailed this interior. It is stunning. This looks high-end, it looks premium, and it looks like you're spending a whole lot more money than you actually are. They've got that leather-lined dashboard, soft touch materials throughout, the carbon fiber inlays for this R-Design package, and it just looks like an expensive SUV. I think if anyone jumps into this car while you're driving them around, they're going to think you've spent a lot of cash on it. Now, motoring journalists always talk about soft touch materials like I just did. We've got a tool here that tests how soft touch a soft touch dashboard is. This is a hardness tester. It's a durometer. Measures from 0 to 100, where 0 is soft and 100 is hard. I'm going to test it on that dashboard and see what kind of number we get. Ah, that is impressive. In the 40s there. Very, very nice. And what about this center console? That feels much firmer. What are we looking at? Okay, that is much firmer, but it has a soft sort of touch finish to it. So yes, the materials in the XC90 are definitely soft touch. Now, what about build quality? Feels really good. I've been sort of poking around here, trying to move things around, and it is nice and solid. This car's built in Sweden instead of being built in China like some of their other cars, and everything feels nice and rigid, and again, like you've spent a lot of money. Enough about that, let's move on to infotainment. Now, if you want to see a detailed review of Volvo's 9-inch portrait infotainment system, you can click on the link up there to watch that. Today, what I'll do is just take you through a brief overview of how it works and what you can expect from it. So it's tiered, it uses a card system. Up the top, you have navigation. Next up is radio with AM, FM, DAB plus digital radio. You then have a phone menu, but you also have Apple CarPlay integrated. The only downside to a portrait screen with Apple CarPlay is that it sits in this tiny little box down here. It just looks kind of funny in that position. With a wide screen, you can actually populate the entire thing with CarPlay. So looks a little bit weird here. Scrolling down from the top gets you access to the car's settings and also the owner's manual. The owner's manual is built into the screen as well. It shows you this picture of the car, then you click on parts like the bulb replacement. and it tells you what you need to do to make that happen. And then down the bottom, you have a shortcut button to the home screen. All of your climate controls are down the bottom as well. It is a bit fiddly while you're driving though, because you need to click and then set your temperature. There's no rotary dial, so I would have preferred to have a secondary option if I needed to. On top of that, you have apps that you can install into the operating system. So you have TuneIn Radio, Google Search. Everything can be placed into the bottom section there and then called upon at any time. And then finally, on the right-hand side menu, you have all of the car's settings. So all contained in this screen. Works really well. It just can be a little bit fiddly at times. Let's talk about the other standard features. You get a 10-speaker sound system, but our car has the optional Bowers and Wilkins sound system. What I love about this is have a look at these speakers. They just look really cool. They've got that metal cover on them. And then inside the doors, you can see them behind there with the yellow speaker underneath. You have heated seats for the first row. Then in addition to that, you have 4 zones of climate control. So 1 for the driver, 1 for the passenger, and then 2 for the second row. Cooling extends all the way to the third row. Volvo's big on safety, so you get airbags throughout the car, including a knee airbag, coverage in the third row. Some SUVs don't do airbags for the third row. You get low and high speed autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian detection, plus a feature that will detect if you leave the road. If you're going to hit a tree or something like that, it will pre-pull the seatbelts, hold you in position so that in the event of an impact, you're not moving anywhere. It's that type of technology that you really need in a family SUV. In addition to that, you have radar cruise control with a self-steering function, voice recognition for the infotainment system. This car's been fitted with a pretty cool looking panoramic sunroof. Opens and then goes all the way back, and there's a little blind there that you can close off with it as well. Auto dimming rear vision mirror. You have auto dimming side mirrors as well. The car is loaded with a bunch of standard equipment, but keep in mind there are lots of options you can also tick. Some of them really should be included in the price. There's also a 360-degree camera, and this is pretty cool. You can select the different cameras that you want to see on the screen, and in addition to that, it can help you park in and out of tight parking spaces. Now, what does the key look like? Let's have a quick sticky beak. I love this. It's got like a leather, probably not leather, but some material that looks like leather padding, the Volvo symbol there, blank on the back, and then on the side you have a panic button, and then lock, unlock, and boot. Pretty sleek looking key. It's a proximity sensing key, so you just keep it in your pocket, pull on the door handle, and then you have a stop-start switch here. Okay, let's talk practicality. Where are you going to store your things? So we've got our phone here. Kind of fits anywhere. There's loads of little places you can store your phone, which is good. Bottles. We have 2 bottle holders here. A third one here that doesn't have the little grip tabs on it. And then inside the door, you have a big pocket for bottles and also other odds and ends. Just next to my knee, I have another hidden storage area here. I don't actually know what you could put in there, but it's huge. And then the glove box, look at this. You don't open it by prying it open. You press this button here. It drops down. Now, it may look like a lot of space with its little air conditioning hole, but it's deceiving because as you close it, that space compresses up against the manual, so there's not actually that much room to put anything in there. And the center console is pretty reasonably sized as well, with 2 USB ports hidden away in there. And what about comfort? These seats look incredibly cool. They've got this Alcantara suede material. It's perforated, nice headboard on it with R-Design. They hug you in really tightly. They're on the firmer side of comfortable. They're probably just a little bit too firm for a longer distance drive. And the cool thing is your controls on the side here as I play around with these, there's one that works as a double control, and then it tells you here on the screen what it's doing. And then you can adjust the cushion or the lumbar using that little switch. Now, what about the back seat? Your big SUV is going to work well for kids and also adults. Have a look at this. I've got heaps of knee room there, lots of toe room as well. And these seats are extremely comfortable. Each seat is its own individual seat, so it feels like it hugs you in nicely. And then you can move it forwards and backwards, and you can also recline it as well if you want to relax a little bit. Oops. You have a center armrest here with a couple of cup holders. We'll see how that fits our bottle. Oh, that's annoying. Our bottle sort of doesn't fit. You kind of have to wedge it in there, and then it's hard to get out as well. It's strange that it's not bigger. That's a fairly standard size bottle. Your bottle then goes in the doors as well. There's a slot for it there, plus an area for odds and ends. I love with the Bowers and Wilkins sound system, just like in the front there, your rear passengers get that metallic cover and then the yellow speaker underneath. Looks really cool. Map pockets in the back of the seats. You then have air vents in the B pillar, so you can direct those to your face instead of having them down here, but you've also got them down here as well with your 4 zones of climate. So each of your 2 rear passengers can set their own temperature and then have a combined fan speed. Have a look at this. Under this little garage door is a power point. So you can plug in to get 220 volts of power and 150 watts. This is an option, but I think it's a pretty good system to have because in addition to USB, you can plug in devices to charge. Speaking of which, there is no USB back here, just a 12 volt outlet, which is pretty disappointing given this day and age where everyone has a device they need to charge or do something with. Then on the side, you have blinds to go up to give you a little bit more privacy. You then have ISOFIX on the 2 outboard seats, plus this nifty feature, a little booster seat, so you can sit a little more upright. So you're buying an XC90 because you want access to a 3rd row. Volvo says that the 3rd row in the XC90 can seat adults, so I'm going to test that in a second. But I want to point out a couple of stupid things here with the 2nd row, especially how usable it is and how functional this whole back space is. So if you want to get into the 3rd row, you can slide this seat forward, and then it has rails so you can easily access it. But if you do want to drop the 2nd row, you can't do that from a central spot. With a lot of these 3-row SUVs, you're able to do the dropping of 2nd and 3rd row from the boot. Can't do any of that here. So let me show you what you have to do to drop the 2nd row. So each one of these is individually controlled. So that folds out of the way. Then there's a separate control for this as well. Now, if you do want to get into the 3rd row, you're going to have to get rid of the cargo blind. Again, unlike a lot of 3-row SUVs, there's actually nowhere to put this. So if I grab this, I'm going to slot it down there for the moment, or you can leave it on the garage floor at home and then probably forget about it. Now, can you imagine if you've got kids all over the place and you need to get the 3rd row up? There's no easy way to do it from the boot, so you've got to do it from here. They're pretty heavy. I'm going to flick them into place. Same story here. It's just not a really good system. So let's see how much room there is in that 3rd row for adults. Okay, let's test this adult theory. Okay, so getting in is not too bad. I'll just slide into my position here. Okay, so how much space have I got? I've got plenty of shoulder room. Headroom isn't that good. It's sort of rubbing on the top there, but in terms of accommodation, you could fit an adult in here in theory. That 2nd row slides forward, so I would have enough knee room there if that was out of the way. Then off to the side, you have 2 cup holders, and then I love this little cubby hole here because on the door, there's a spider's web and a spider. Not real though, so it's all good. So yes, the 2nd and 3rd row configuration is pretty clumsy, but the upshot is that you actually get a lot of storage space. In a lot of the ute-based SUVs, you don't have much room behind the 3rd row. Here in the Volvo, on the other hand, you have a little over 300 litres, and that means you can actually fit a full-sized suitcase in there, plus other odds and ends. So big space there behind the 3rd row. You don't need to sacrifice anything. Let me show you some of the other nifty features here. So storage on the side there, you have a 12 volt outlet, and then I love this. So with the optional air suspension, one push of that drops the rear end, making loading luggage and other pieces easier. Now, what happens with the rest of this space? Let me get rid of this 3rd row quickly. There's this thing, and I don't know exactly what this does. I think it's a divider between that space and this space, or is it a baby change area? Kind of looks like you can store stuff under there, but when it drops down, there's no additional room. So let me know in the comments below what this thing is actually for or what it's meant to do. Under here though, we have our space saver spare tyre, a jack as well, and then if we lift these, the optional air suspension canisters are here as well, or not, depending on which option box you tick. All right, let's get our luggage in there for a bit of reference. So you have just under 700 litres of space when the 3rd row is retracted. And then if you drop the 2nd row as well, there's almost 1900 litres of cargo space here. It's like a van. So we've hit the road in the XC90. There's a big bus. It doesn't feel overly big on the road, but it has its moments and you can't escape that. We'll talk about visibility and what it's like out here on the road in a sec, but let's talk engine first. Under the bonnet is a 2-litre turbocharged and supercharged petrol engine. So they're both able to combine so that the supercharger fills in the low end of the rev range and the turbocharger fills in right at the very top. And that allows the engine to output 246 kilowatts of power and 440 Newton meters of torque. It's a really nice and healthy number and makes this big SUV feel pretty sprightly on its feet. All of that torque is routed through an 8-speed automatic transmission, and this car uses what they call a Heldex coupling. So it's like a clutch pack that enables the all-wheel drive system to work when it detects slip. Pretty efficient system for the most part. You don't really notice it in action, which in my opinion is the sign of a good all-wheel drive system. Now, the good thing about that twin charge setup, Volkswagen used to use this ages and ages ago in the Golf, is that when you get on the throttle, it's always good to go. Like, it just snaps into action. You've got the supercharger ready to go, and you can hear a little bit of supercharger whine as well, which I reckon is pretty cool. It doesn't need to be over the top, but you know that it's there. And then the turbocharger takes care of everything at the top end of the rev band. That means it's good for a 0 to 100 km/h run of just 6.4 seconds. And this is what that looks like. Now, here's the curious thing. This car currently has a top speed of 230 km/h. That's what it's governed at. Volvo made an announcement just recently that from now on, all of the cars they produce will have a speed limit of 180 km/h. They think people shouldn't drive any faster than that because they don't really understand the consequences of speed. So that's an interesting theory. Not an issue in Australia where the maximum you can go is 130, but in other parts of the world, such as Germany, where you can really get up and dance, you're going to be limited in terms of how fast you can go. In terms of fuel economy, Volvo claims 8.5 litres per 100 kilometres. That is a very, very ambitious claim. We are sitting on 13.2 litres per 100 kilometres at the moment. This engine is really nice, it is peppy, but the downside is that it can be pretty thirsty. Let's talk drive modes. So there is a little dial here. You give that a click and it presents you with Eco, Comfort, Polestar Engineered, and then Off-Road. Now, you can just leave it in Eco or Comfort for just day-to-day driving, but if you do stick it into Polestar Engineered, everything becomes a little sharper. You've got better throttle response, it tucks in nicely to corners, and the suspension hunkers down as well if you have the optional air suspension system. It's surprising how much you can throw this car around. It doesn't complain a great deal. It just feels nice and sporty, and I guess that's that sport in sport utility vehicle. Volvo's really worked to give it that sharp feel behind the wheel. In terms of steering feel, it's not overly weighted, it's not overly light either, so it does feel a little sporty with that intention. Same goes with the brake pedal feel. It's nice and soft, but it's confidence inspiring, so if you do need to jump on the brakes at any point, they are going to respond straight away. Let's talk off-roading. You're clearly not going to be going across the Simpson Desert in your XC90, but there is 238 millimeters of ground clearance, and then there is an off-road mode as well, which uses that air suspension to jack the car up a little bit and adjust the traction controls, so that'll give you the ability to do some light off-roading if you're going to go camping or on a muddy trail or something. What about ride comfort? Okay, so this is the bit that kind of lets the R-Design down a little bit. They are low profile tyres, so you're getting a ride that can be a little firm at times, but it's made even worse if you don't option the air suspension. I've driven a Volvo before, an R-Design car, on coil springs, and it is rough, really rough. So if you're doing any country driving, any driving over potholes, it's going to send you mad. So make sure you tick the air suspension box and you'll end up with a ride that is really nice, but on the firmer side of comfortable. Let's talk cabin noise. It's surprisingly quiet in here despite the fact it's rolling on low profile tyres. Volvo's managed to create an ambience that just feels comfortable. We're out on a country road at the moment. It's a coarse chip road and there's not a huge amount of noise intrusion in the cabin. It also gives you a chance to soak up that killer sound system as well. Interested in towing? Well, don't get an XC90. 2,400 kilos of braked towing capacity. It's not a huge amount. If you go for something like a Q7 that has 3,500 kilos, that's going to be a much better option if you're doing any caravanning or any towing of any great description. Visibility out of the cabin is really good. Yes, it is a big car, but I can clearly see the front, the sides, and then also very clearly see out the rear. Often rearward visibility is compromised by headrests and other bits and pieces in three-row SUVs, but here it's really great. The wing mirrors are big and they have that blind spot monitor built into them as well. It's not gargantuan like the old one was when it comes to the turning circle either. 11.8 meters, which is fairly reasonable for a big SUV. Remember the last generation of XC90, you needed like a 4-lane freeway to turn around because the turning circle was horrendous. Okay, I've said this plenty of times before, if you must have a 7-seat SUV because you've got kids and stuff everywhere, you may as well have one that's good looking and practical and fun to drive. And that's what the XC90 is. It is still a really good looking car despite its age. It is very practical and it's very fun to drive. It is let down by some big options pricing, and it's also let down by a fairly firm ride, so make sure you get air suspension if you're buying this car. Your back will thank you. This is a really good way to spend about 100 grand on a 7-seat SUV without having to go down the path of all that German stuff. So let me know in the comments below, have you bought one of these? What's it like as a longer term proposition? Is it expensive to run? What could be improved? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you could hit like, follow it up with a subscribe, and also press the bell icon so you can find out every time we drive these SUVs that everyone seems to be buying. But until next time, take it easy.